Bonjour tout le monde et merci de nous rejoindre ce soir pour notre présentation publique sur la cartographie des risques naturels pour la rivière Castor dans la ville d'Ottawa et des comtés unis de Prescott et Russell. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for our public presentation on natural hazard mapping for the Castor River within the City of Ottawa and the United Counties of Prescott and Russell. My name is John Mesman, and I'm South Nation Conservation Authority's Managing Director of Property, Conservation Land, and Community Outreach. And I have the pleasure of being your moderator for the evening. For those listening in right now, we're about to get started, and I'll share a few meeting procedures while we just wait for a few more people to connect. We do expect this meeting to be about 30 to 40 minutes, and we'll stay online after to answer any questions that you might have. We will be delivering this presentation in English. However, our slides will also display in French on your screen, and all of this content is available in French on our website at nation.on.ca/consultations. Donc, nous ferons cette présentation en anglais. Cependant, nos diapos s'afficheront également en français et tout ce contenu est disponible en français sur notre site web à nation.on.ca/consultation. For those familiar with our usual consultations, we've really enjoyed the ability to meet people in person in their communities, usually in the closest arena or school, and to really sit down one-on-one and show you the maps for your property and talk about your experiences with flooding or where you might have noticed erosion on your property. However, due to our project timelines, along with the often unpredictable winter season, I know we've got some warm weather this week coupled with some rain and freezing temperatures, so often confusing, but we're also completing 3 different consultations for 3 different areas at the same time. And so we're making these presentations available online and offering instead an extended consultation timeline so that property owners may still schedule those one-on-one meetings with us, either in person or online after the presentation, so that we can review some of this property-specific mapping. And we can do that throughout the month of March 2024. These meetings are also being recorded and will be available on our website and YouTube channel. And for those online with us right now, just note that your videos and microphones are automatically turned off, so you don't have to worry about any feedback or IT issues. And you're welcome to watch this presentation wherever is most convenient to you. You may also ask us questions at any point during the presentation, just that Q&A tab on your screen, which you can type in questions as we go along. And please do type in your questions as we go through the meeting, as there is about a 30-second lag between when we're actually speaking and the live broadcast that you're watching. And we can also walk through some of these examples at the end if there's interest. So just let us know before we reach the end of the presentation. For this meeting, we will be providing some information on our organization as well as natural hazard mapping and what this means if you're looking to develop or build. And as mentioned earlier, all of this information, including the draft maps, the bilingual presentation, all those resources are available at nation.on.ca/consultations. And with that, we've got a few more folks joining us, so that's great. So I think we'll get this presentation started. So again, everyone, welcome. Bienvenue à tous to our public meeting for updated natural hazard mapping for the Castor River within the City of Ottawa and the United Counties of Prescott and Russell. Everyone who owns property within or adjacent to this area and our draft maps would have received a letter from us a few weeks ago with an invitation to attend this meeting. And if you didn't receive a letter and are watching, it's all good. You're still welcome to participate and ask us any questions. So we'll get things started with a few comments on our organization, the South Nation Conservation Authority, just to give you a bit of an overview on who we are and what we do. And when I'm done, I'll pass the hot seat over to some of my colleagues to explain a bit about these natural hazards and walk through some permitting examples for you. So we are one of Ontario's 36 conservation authorities, which operate under provincial legislation called the Conservation Authorities Act. But we also deliver other work through agreements with provincial ministries and our own municipalities to deliver local environmental services. In our region of Eastern Ontario, we do work for 16 different municipalities, and our jurisdiction is around the South Nation River and its tributaries, beginning near the headwaters near Brockville and ending near Plantagenet, where the river empties into the Ottawa River. You'll also notice in this map that our region extends to both the St. Lawrence and Ottawa rivers. These are recent developments over the last decade where we've extended our jurisdiction to these areas at the request of our member municipalities to help deliver environmental services, but especially floodplain mapping and flood forecasting. which means though we work as watershed managers to manage, conserve, and restore natural resources, you can expect that one of the most important parts of our jobs is to protect people and property from natural hazards like flooding, erosion, and landslides. We also deliver several services on behalf of our partners, including septic system inspections and drinking water source protection. And we also operate 8 different dams and other water control structures and manage water response programs to help predict and respond to flood and low water events. The landslide photo on your screen is not included in the study area, but it is the largest recorded landslide in Ontario between Castleman and Lemay, which is an area that's been susceptible to these large-scale events for centuries and had some really significant slides in the 70s and 90s. And so this area in particular was mapped by us and is regulated to limit development. And in the 90s, we also helped relocate the former village and its residents just 1 year before that landslide in the photo occurred, about 500 meters from the main street. So this potential landslide area is not included within the study area, but it's still a good reminder of why we do this work, much like the Ottawa River floods of 2017 and 2019. And like the landslide areas, our staff also work to map floodplains and erosion hazards in areas identified by our municipalities to ensure that whatever new buildings are being approved are being built in the safest ways possible. So when our staff review development files and proposals, and we'll share some examples in a bit, we're not always looking to restrict development like we would in the Castleman to Lemieux area. Our staff are often working with the property owner and developer to find ways to approve projects. And though we want to provide support for good construction projects, we do have to be clear in saying that this can be very circumstantial. There is not always going to be a one-size-fits-all approach to approvals, and this is why permission is required through a permit before work can proceed safely. There may also be instances where what is proposed to be built may not be safe, whether due to safe access, steep slopes, or flood elevations. But in many scenarios, proposals can be altered, moved, further studied, or even flood-proofed so that you can receive a building permit. We want to make sure that we're approving development that's going to protect you, but also your investment, being your property and the buildings you construct on them. And we also need to consider how the alteration of watercourses or shorelines, or even your construction project, how it might impact your neighbors and their properties as well. We also deliver environmental monitoring programs that help us report on watershed conditions and environmental health. And I mention this because our planning and regulations team use this data to make informed decisions when reviewing development proposals. And when we know an area is in poor environmental health, we also do our best to work with our partners to improve the environment through restoration projects. And we're very proud of these restoration efforts that we're able to complete. And these are thanks to good partnerships with government, academia, industry, and other NGOs. And I did want to share a reminder that we are a not-for-profit organization. So we do rely on fundraising, grants, and partnerships to help fund this type of work. And community stewardship and outreach is also an important part of our efforts. We also deliver a number of different environmental stewardship programs through agreements with our county and municipal partners. So these include things like our roadside tree programs, free woodlot advisory services, storm recovery programs, as depicted in the photo there, but also water quality improvement programs, specifically for farmers that offer cost share funding for projects that help improve water quality. And some of our programs are specifically funded by our partners and delivered in their area, but many of our services are accessible throughout the jurisdiction. And our most popular initiative is our tree planting program, which is often what people know us most for. So we're able to sell trees each spring at reduced rates or take care of all your planting needs whenever you have more than an acre of planting space available. And we were quite pleased to have planted our 4 millionth tree since 1990 last year. Next, just a final slide for our overview here. We wanted to mention that we are a public land trust and have been acquiring land through partial purchase or donation since 1970 to help protect significant natural spaces in Eastern Ontario. Many of these properties were also acquired for flood mitigation, including areas to construct berms and dikes, and some of them were acquired to keep them from being developed. But much of our land is forested or contains provincially significant wetlands. And we do own over 13,000 acres of conservation land. And within this inventory, we also operate 15 day-use parks called conservation areas. And many of these natural spaces are actually on land that was donated to us to help protect and conserve their family's natural legacy. And with that, I'll pass the virtual microphone over to Alison McDonald, South Nation Conservation's Managing Director of Approvals, to dive into the public presentation on natural hazard updates. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, John. So what exactly is natural hazard mapping? When we say natural hazard mapping, we're generally talking about maps that will identify either floodplains or erosion hazards for a specific drainage area. A floodplain is a low-lying area that you can find near watercourses, and these are areas that may be susceptible to flooding, but especially during spring melts or heavy rain events. An erosion hazard is an area that may potentially be subject to slope failure or retreat, and can be triggered by a variety of geological, seismic, hydrologic, or man-made factors. So the example shown on the screen is a house within a regulated area where development would be limited due to the steep ravine that exists behind the house. This ravine had what we call an unstable slope. Unfortunately, the photo as well shows a garage that was constructed in this area without a permit in 2016, which resulted in the garage and the back end of the property falling into the ravine in the following year. And this was due to the additional loading at the top of that unstable slope. And because there was no permit issued, it wasn't something that we were able to review and make sure that it was safe before construction. So why do we map natural hazards? Well, our organization identifies a risk for local municipalities, and we try to complete this natural hazard mapping when our municipal partners request it. This type of work is often funded by all levels of government, and we work together to identify flood hazards and ensure that we can protect people and property and support sustainable new development where it's safe. The guidelines and the methods that we use to complete this work are also established by the province of Ontario to ensure consistency in the hazard mapping and permitting that takes place across the province. So these studies that we do are often requested for areas that are experiencing increased development pressure. They provide developers with information that they need to be able to safely design new communities. We also get requests from our municipal partners to study areas that don't have mapping or to update older hazard maps, many of which were completed in the 1980s. These older studies did not have access to the high-resolution topographical data and computer models that we're able to use today. Once our mapping is updated, we include it in our Conservation Authority regulations, and these hazard maps are also included in official plans and municipal zoning schedules. This important step ensures that property owners know about hazard areas on a property when either building, buying, or selling land. So if you received a letter in the mail about these mapping updates, your property may be located within what we call the regulation area for natural hazards. And this means that you will need permission through a permit if you are looking to construct a new building or further develop the property that's found within that regulated area. There's no impact to current uses like agriculture, and you can continue to farm any productive land, but you may need a permit if you're looking to construct a building, place or remove large amounts of fill, or subdivide your land for housing. A permit from our Conservation Authority will provide you with the steps to safely undertake your project and ensure that people and property are protected from potential impacts of natural hazards. It also ensures sustainable development practices are in place before a building permit from the municipality can be issued. So when it comes to mapping a natural hazard, we use a combination of on-the-ground fieldwork and computer modeling. Our background data is gathered on the land use, the topography, stream flow, and precipitation. We then conduct field surveys to collect information on any local infrastructure like culverts or bridges. For each mapping project, fieldwork is completed on both public and private properties with permission from property owners, which we obtain at the beginning of the project. The field data that we collect is complementing to our LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. This LiDAR essentially provides the detailed topographic information that we use to basically support our models. We recently coordinated the creation of new LiDAR mapping for most of Eastern Ontario through a partnership with all levels of government. Through this initiative, airplanes were used to remote sense with pulse lasers, and essentially they created a 3D elevation model of our landscape. The topographical information is then combined with that field data we talked about, the historical information that our organization collects, and climate stations. And all of this is put into a computer model, which calculates stream flow for different precipitation events. We also create extra mapping products of different storm scenarios for our emergency responders. The models are then all reviewed by an outside expert engineering consultant before the draft maps are finalized and made available on the website. I'm now going to pass things over to one of our water resource engineers, Shahin Zand, who will explain a little more about how these hazards are mapped.
Thank you, Alison. With the use of computer models, we are able to define flood and erosion hazards based on provincial standards, which means that when we are looking at floodplains, we are modeling and mapping a storm event that could create what's called a major 100-year flood, known as the 100-year flood event standard. This rain and flood event would have a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. For erosion hazards, which is a more permissive regulation, they are mapped based on the 100-year erosion rate standard, which means we are looking at the average annual rate of erosion or recession in a given area over a 100-year time span. After floodplains are mapped and the flow of water is well defined in different storm scenarios, the regulated area along a river or a stream is generally determined by adding a 15-meter buffer or allowance around the 100-year flood event. A permit is required for development within the entire area, where we look at safe access and floodwater levels along other considerations. Erosion hazards are areas potentially subject to land regression due to a combination of factors. One thing to note for this study area is that the previous mapping only included an analysis of floodplain and not erosion hazards. With erosion hazards, we are investigating the average rate of recession over a 100-year time span. Riverine erosion hazard has three main components: analysis of slope stability, toe erosion, and access allowance. However, erosion hazard mapping will not always have an additional allowance added to the regulation area, as these areas are mapped more conservatively with access considerations included. When creating the regulation area, which you will see in online mapping on our geoportal, you may not always see the different hazards identified. This is because we use the greatest of either hazard to create the regulation area. In many cases, especially within a flood landscape like this area, we are mostly identifying flood hazards. However, there are several areas where the erosion hazard is slightly greater than the floodplain. The Conservation Authority may grant permission for proposed work in a natural hazard area if it is demonstrated to SNC's satisfaction that the proposed work will not affect the control of flooding or erosion. Now I'll turn things back over to John.
Thanks, Shahin. So the map on our screen is now showing that regulations area for the Castor River. And so this space is going to include about a 740 square kilometer drainage area over those 50 kilometers of water course that are mapped. The area, as we alluded to previously, is predominantly used for agriculture, but we do have some significant settlement areas in Russell Township near the Castor River. The landscape in general is fairly flat. We do have about an 11.5-meter drop in elevation over the 26 kilometers. So it's changing by about half a meter every kilometer. And one thing to note about this study area is that the Castor River watershed is already regulated by the Conservation Authority. The last floodplain study was completed for this area in 1981, and that occurred on the main stretch of the Castor River with some erosion mapping as well with some older LiDAR topography. However, the East Castor River and some portions of the main stem of the South Nation did not have older floodplain erosion hazard mapping. So there are a few sections of the study area where we won't have old mapping to compare to. And so what I'm going to do next is pass things over to Ben Colgan, SNC's GIS database analyst, to show you how to interpret the maps, but also how to use our online portal so you can compare these different mapping products.
Thanks, John. Good evening, everyone. So to help make it easier for everyone to view the new mapping products, we've developed an easy-to-use mapping application that's linked up on our consultation webpage. This tool will help you understand what potential impacts the proposed regulation data has on your own property and home. So right now I'm going to walk through a short demonstration to help familiarize everyone with this web tool. So first, you'll need to access SNC's website at nation.on.ca/consultations, or you can navigate from the homepage. Just click on the heading titled Development and select Public Consultation, Natural Hazards Mapping, and click on that link. Once on the public consultation page, scroll down to the information about the Castor River study, as there are separate maps and web links for each of the study areas that we're sharing with the public this month. Once you've found the Castor River watershed section, you'll see the map with the regulations area depicted in gold. And directly under this image, select the link that says click here to access the interactive property map. We've now arrived at the web mapping application, and you'll need to accept the terms of use, which describes the mapping area included and reminds users that this information is displayed as a reference tool for personal and non-commercial uses. It also reminds users that people should contact our office directly to confirm information or if they wish to obtain a paper map for their property. Once accepted, you can now see the draft data is displayed. The blue fill area is our draft floodplain, and the yellow line indicates the extent of the regulation area where you may need a permit from the Conservation Authority to build. Once here, feel free to zoom in and out of the map and pan in different directions, just like you would if you were using something like Google Maps. And just note that this viewer is only going to display information for the Castor study area. We can also search for a specific address or intersection using the search bar in the upper left-hand corner. Here you can enter your home address to review the location of mapped natural hazards in relation to your property. So let's try that with a specific location within the Castor River study area. In this example, I search for the intersection of Castor Street and Wade Road. When we select the address from the drop-down menu, the map will automatically zoom to that location and place an orange pin on the address so you can see it on the screen. Now we can review the data in detail. We can use the legend button to tell us what data we're currently viewing. And in the legend on the top right of the screen, we can see that the draft regulation data is shown as the gold line and the floodplain is shown as the blue fill. If we use the map layers button, which is to the left of the map legend, we can change what layers are displayed on the map. For example, we can turn off the draft floodplain layer, which is our new floodplain that we've updated, and turn on the current approved regulation line, which is the old regulation line from 1978 and 1981, and we can now see a dashed purple line. So we can use this tool to compare both the current and draft regulation line and see how the draft line has changed during this update. We can also use the map layers menu to compare the current and new draft flood lines, just the same way. On the screen now, we can see that the draft floodplain is shown in dark blue, while the current or older floodplain is shown with a brighter blue line. If you'd like to look up more addresses, the best way is to start over is to refresh your web browser and just reload the map before entering in a new address. PDF maps are available in detail on the website, which can be downloaded, but the online map will certainly help you access the data a lot quicker, so definitely give it a try. And once the consultation review is completed, the final version of the regulation area will be added to SNC's main geoportal after it's approved by our board of directors. And you can always find that link for our main geoportal on SNC's homepage. And with that, I'll pass things over to Claire Lemay, one of our senior planners at South Nation Conservation.
Thanks, Ben. I work as part of the team that reviews applications for development. And I'm going to share a few examples with you today to explain the process for getting a Conservation Authorities Act permit in the regulated area. Our definition of development includes new buildings, additions to existing buildings, site grading, or adding and removing fill. If you're planning work like this on or near regulated area, or you're looking to buy a property that has regulated area, The first step is to call or email the South Nation office. Our staff will let you know if you need a permit. I'll share 2 examples with you of what the permit application process is like for landowners wanting to do work in or near the regulated areas. On this slide, we have an example of a property that has floodplain and erosion hazards. The floodplain is shown in blue and the regulated area is shown in yellow. In this example, the owner wanted to build a garage. The first step is to call South Nation to consult on the required setback from the slope and from the river. After the first phone call, he provided a basic sketch of the proposed garage size and location. Because the garage was proposed so close to the edge of the slope, South Nation's permitting officer noted that an engineer would need to complete a study and determine the safe setback distance from the erosion hazard. South Nation also asked for architectural plans for the garage, a sediment and erosion control plan, and a description of the work. The next step in the process is to prepare supporting information. This might be something that you can do yourself, but it can often require hiring an expert. The landowner in this example hired a local engineering firm to prepare the sediment and erosion control plan and a slope stability study. The engineering firm also measured elevations on the property and confirmed that the proposed garage was outside of the flood hazard. The landowner drew the building plans himself, which he also used for his building permit application. Once a complete application is received, staff will notify you of the appropriate fees based on our fee schedule, which is publicly available on our website. The complexity of the file and size of the development helps to determine the level of review needed and the corresponding fee. More complex applications like this one are reviewed by SNC's technical review team. The review team may have questions for the experts who prepared the plans and studies. In this case, we were able to resolve our questions via email with the engineer. It's important to note that not all permit applications will require additional technical review. Once the review is complete, you will receive the permit by email. It may include conditions like a follow-up visit after the work is completed. Most permits are issued with a 2-year timeline to complete the work, and it's possible for you to ask for an extension if you don't end up completing your project within the timeline. The landowner in our example here was able to build his new garage safely outside of the floodplain and with an appropriate setback from the slope. He knows that his investment is safe because of our review. In our second example, the landowner wanted to build an extension to the existing house. She contacted SNC by email to ask if she would need a permit. Now, because the regulation line overlaps with the location of the existing house, we needed to know the exact location of the proposed work. South Nation provided a digital map to the landowner's architect so they could check if the proposed addition was inside the SNC regulated area. The architect recommended adjusting the building layout so that the addition would be entirely outside of the regulated area. This meant that there was no requirement for a permit from South Nation, and the addition was located safely away from the hazard area. I will pass things over to John now, who will share some contact information and important links before closing the meeting.
Thanks, Claire. So this does bring us to close to the end of our presentation. So if anyone is still holding on to a question they'd like us to explore, please feel free to use that question function on your screen and get those submitted. This particular study was completed at the request of the City of Ottawa and the United Counties of Prescott and Russell, and is funded by our municipal partners, the Conservation Authority, and has received support from the Government of Canada through the Flood Hazard Identification and Mapping Program. So please feel free to connect with our team directly. However, you're also welcome to contact our county partners, including Louis Prévost, Director of Planning and Forestry, or Dominique Lefebvre, Manager of Planning. We also, as alluded to earlier, welcome one-on-one meetings between March 1st and March 22nd, where We can organize these virtually through a meeting format like this, by telephone or in person. There is a request form. If you scroll down to the bottom of the consultation webpage, you can enter your information there. You can select a preferred meeting time, morning, afternoon, evening, and we'll get back to you with a suggestion on a time that would work best for you. And as part of that submission, if you're able to include a little bit of information with your request, we can make sure that the right team members are also available to meet with you so that we can get you the information that you need. Nous sommes également heureux d'organiser des réunions en anglais ou en français. Alors, n'hésitez pas à nous faire savoir ce qui vous convient le mieux. Et puis, maintenant que nous sommes arrivés à la fin de notre présentation, nous allons vérifier vos questions. So, we have made it through our presentation, and so I'm just going to get our team members up on the screen here to join me in the hot seat, and we'll try and stay online for a few minutes and answer any questions that you might have. We have a few that were submitted that we'll tackle, and of course, if any others pop in while we're chatting, we welcome those as well. The first question that I'll share was someone submitted some questions about the particular study area. And so just to clarify, we are completing consultations for 3 different study areas within our region. This one in particular is for the Castor River watershed. And there was a question about a property on Gregoire Road. And so Gregoire Road does go north-south through the study area. There's not much floodplain or natural hazards identified on that street in particular, with the exception of the bridge and crossing there. But as Ben demonstrated earlier, we would really encourage you to use that online interactive property portal and submit your address so you can see where the mapping is in relation to your property. And then just that reminder that you're only going to be able to see the natural hazards for that particular study area when you use that link. Now, I want to segue to a question we received earlier when we were talking about the different permitting requirements. Someone had submitted a question on the definition of fill. And so I wanted to pass that off to one of my team members, maybe Alison, if you wanted to provide some context on that definition and what we're looking for when we're talking about fill.
It's a great question. So the question was just what would be a large amount of fill? So it really depends on the size of the property and the type of development that you're doing. If we're talking about a really large area, you could probably apply a dump truck load of fill over a huge area, and it wouldn't really make a noticeable change in elevation. But on a regular property, you could probably put like a wheelbarrow of fill, and it wouldn't be a big deal. What we want to know is more if there's going to be an impact either on the way the lot drains or on the way that water might pool on the property in times of flooding. So we're talking about more than a wheelbarrow. If you're not sure, it's always best to give us a call. And we have great staff who get these kind of questions all the time, all over our watershed, and they're pretty quick to get a response back to you and just give you that peace of mind verbally over the phone, no problem. But yeah, if you're just putting, a wheelbarrow or two around a larger property, it wouldn't be a big deal. But if you're talking about bringing in fill for a purpose of augmenting that lot significantly, you're probably going to want to get a permit for that.
All right. Can we talk a little bit about that pre-consultation? I wonder, Claire, if I could get you to maybe walk through what that process looks like for the typical person, right? So they have an idea of how they want to develop their property, or they have a question. What can they expect when they reach out to South Nation?
Yeah, for sure. So like I mentioned in the presentation, the first step is to call us or send us an email. We are available for in-person meetings at our office if that's what your preference is, but really most of the pre-consultations that we do are by phone or by email. So a landowner can send us a description of the work they want to do. We'll often ask for a sketch so you can draw on top of a printout from Google Maps or hand draw something yourself, just to give us a general idea of what it is you're trying to do, the dimensions of of what you're going to build and where on your property. And then we will give you a call or email you back and let you know if a permit's required and what kind of supporting information we might need. And we can talk you through what that process is going to look like, give you an estimate of what the fees would be, and answer any questions that you might have about the permit process.
That's great. Thanks, Claire. So we've got a couple questions on erosion hazards and shoreline stabilization. So I wonder, Sandra, if you or Shahin could provide a few comments on, in general, what property owners might want to consider if parts of their shoreline are eroding or if they notice erosion on their property. Sandra, I'll just get you to unmute yourself if that's okay. Sorry. Thanks.
I will start and thank you. And maybe Shahin wants to add something after. I think the better thing, if you want to deal with erosion, the better thing that you can do is come to our office for pre-consultation. Along the Castor River, there is different soils, and one of the soils is clay. And if you have a clay, you are in an area that you have clay, you might need to hire an engineer to do a design for your shoreline. When the banks are really steep and they have clay, you probably require an engineering design. There is other methodologies to protect the bank from erosion. And if you come to visit us, we can give you some ideas. And we can also tell you if you require an engineering design. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks. I wonder if we can provide a generalized response. There's a couple of questions related to agriculture, and I wonder if I can toss this one back to you, Alison, just commenting in general, what a farmer could expect working their land if there's natural hazards mapped on their property. And I'll get you to unmute as well. Thanks.
Thanks. Sorry about that. So if you have an agricultural field that you've been farming for years, you're going to notice that probably it gets wet in the spring. There's going to be some years it gets a lot wetter. So you're probably pretty aware that land does tend to flood or is seasonally wet. So it's not going to affect your ability to farm other than, obviously how early you can get on the fields to get in there and get working. But there's no restrictions in terms of active agriculture. If you are looking to build like a barn, an accessory building, a garage, a shed, anytime you're looking at construction, then you'd want to come in and have a pre-consultation chat and get your permit for that. And if you're doing any work like cleaning out any of your ditches, working in any of the water courses, any of that work where you're interfering with the bed or the bank of any of the water courses, ditches, municipal drain, whatever it is, that work requires a permit too. So drain cleanouts would require a permit under our regulations. So usually we see those municipal drain permits coming in, in the fall and the winter. We're working through a few right now, really common practice in our watershed, but one that you will need to come and have a chat and get a permit. And, the purpose of all of this is to make sure that the work that you do either in the water course on your property or on the land is not going to affect anyone upstream or downstream of that property. And really that's what is ultimately going to come down to.
Thanks, Alison. I'll switch gears a bit. There's a couple questions on the mapping portal, which is great to see. People have already tried it out during the meeting. We love that. Ben, there's some questions on the colors used to delineate some of these features. And there's also a question on the 100-year flood as the flood line, the elevation level that was used in our regulation mapping. I wonder if you could provide a few comments on the 1 to 100-year flood line and also the different colors on the map that people might see.
Yeah, for sure, John. So the 1 to 100-year flood line, just looking at the comment here, it's not from the 1970 or 1981 plans. It's newly modeled and created for the study this year. In terms of interpreting the data on the map, I see the question says that my house is between the yellow line and the blue fill. The blue fill represents the floodplain, and the yellow line represents the furthest extent of the regulation layer. So if you find your house or your property within that that period between the yellow line and the blue fill, that would mean you're in the regulated area, and the potential for a permit may be required depending on what your development would entail.
Thanks, Ben. And I'll follow that up. There's a question on standard distances or minimums and maximum setbacks for these exclusions. And I kind of want to bring that question back to an earlier comment I made at the start of the presentation, which is really that, these sorts of approvals are circumstantial, right? They're all going to be unique. And what's unique about this area is there are areas where the regulation limit is established based on the erosion hazard versus areas where the limit's established because we know it has the potential to flood. And so both of those scenarios are going to mean something a little bit different in terms of, what you're hoping to achieve on your property. And so there isn't a standard that can be applied in these scenarios. We really do have to look at it on a site-specific basis to help provide guidance and also to support your project. So just wanted to clarify that those two different hazards do require different levels of study, and there's different things that we can do to protect people for each of them. I do see some questions on site visits. So I wonder, maybe Alison or Claire, if I could toss that to you in terms of what can people expect when it comes to site visits for permits?
Yeah, so we have a couple different options for people. If you're looking for something like a property inquiry, so that's where we can give you a letter that describes in writing, signed from our office, what kind of regulated areas are on the property, what types of hazards are on the property. We can also combine that with a site visit. So there's two different options, with or without a site visit. And that is the best way to get a comprehensive review of the natural hazards on your property. And at the end of it, you get this sort of written record. Very helpful if you're looking at selling, buying property, or if you're looking at developing or working with someone else to develop a property. That would be the sort of gold standard option. And there's a fee for that service. It's all provided in writing at the end, maps, etc. So there's that. If you're also experiencing erosion, and I know on the Castor, we've been out a few times to different properties, we may come out and just bring one of our engineers, take a look at the erosion happening there. Obviously, because we map these hazards, we do want to know when someone's experiencing significant erosion on their property. So we may conduct a site visit, both to help you as the property owner with steps and things you can do, but also to help us make sure our mapping is correct. So if you're experiencing something significant on the property, it may be something that our office wants to come out and take a look and walk through with you.
That's great. I wonder if we can segue into enforcement. And so obviously we're talking about scenarios right now where a property owner might have knowledge that there might potentially be natural hazards. And so they're going to follow through a process where they work with us to get permission, but also to help design their project to make sure it's going to protect them and their property. But there are scenarios, of course, where either property owners might not have knowledge of these hazards and might complete projects that could have negative consequences, or we might see something on the landscape that we think might potentially be of concern. I'm wondering if someone could walk through our report of concern process and what to expect on the regulations front.
I could take a stab at it, and if Claire has anything to add, but
Right.
we do have a report of concern page on the website, and that's where we would direct anyone who is out and about and kind of observes something that they think may be, hey, this person's working in the slope, or this house looks like it's being constructed really close, and I know there's a floodplain there because I have one on my property. We have something called report of concern, and that's where we get people to give us that information. We usually look for some pictures. We want to have your name so we can contact you. And essentially, this is because the process that we take is a legal process under legislation. And if we do take any action, we need to have quite a bit of information in the report that we get. So although we have great success working with landowners getting permits, it does happen sometimes that people, like you said, John, either they're not aware of the regulation, they're not aware that it was on their property, or they just go ahead and do work without the permit. So It does happen. It's our standards are different depending on what kind of feature it is. So if we're talking about the Castor River, for example, where we're regulating the unstable slope and the floodplain, then we would be looking for activities that specifically would be destabilizing to the bank. So it might not be necessarily things like tree cutting or cutting grass or things like that. Whereas if you're talking about something going on in a wetland, we would be more interested if there's vegetation being cleared and things like that too. So when you put it on the report of concern page, you pass it on to our permitting officers and they review it. And if there's action to be taken, we follow up directly with the landowner. So I think if that's all.
Yeah, no, I think that's solid. And one thing to note too, I mean, if you're not sure, there's no harm in letting us know. We review every submission and we'll follow up as appropriate. So, don't hesitate to reach out. There's also the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks maintains their own pollution reporting and environmental concern reporting online portal as well. If you Google Ministry of the Environment Pollution Reporting Hotline, you'll see a similar form. So there's lots of areas or potential concerns that are shared with us that sometimes require the province to investigate. So just be aware that those two submissions exist. And of course, if we receive something that should be passed on to a different agency, we'll take care of that for you. So the next question, I'll pass this over to Claire, I think. There's a couple questions on, smaller ancillary buildings. If someone's in a regulated area and they're looking to build maybe a small garden shed or a deck on the back of their house, they're wondering what that process would look like.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so if you're looking to build a shed or a deck in your backyard or something like that, the first step is to call our office or send us an email. Not all decks are the same, not all sheds are the same. So it really does depend on where it's located on your property, what the hazard is that's being regulated, whether or not we would require a permit for that or just let it go. So as always, the first step is to call us and we will take a look at the specifics of your property and let you know if a permit would be required for that or not.
Thanks, Claire. And the emphasis here too is that not all projects are going to require a permit, and that's okay, right? And it's great for us too when we get the inquiry and we can, guide development away from an at-risk area, or if it's not of concern, I mean, that's great to share with the property owner as well. So feel free to reach out. I believe we've answered all the questions that have been submitted so far. So I was just going to pass kind of a general one out there. And this is kind of a reminder, if you're still holding on to a question, get it submitted before we wrap things up. But just to close, I thought I'd toss this one over to Sandra, maybe just in terms of, general flood proofing measures, right? If someone's in the floodplain area or maybe knows that their property is susceptible to flooding, what are some of the things that they might be looking at in terms of flood proofing their house or their property?
Thank you, Sean. So if somebody has a property in the floodplain, they will require a permit for any additions or any other development that they want to do in their lot. In general, when you have to do an addition, let's suppose, when you come to contact us, we will ask you to flood-proof the new area. And flood-proofing means that the elevation of your lower opening, it has to be at least the floodplain plus 30 centimeters in high. So why is this? The idea is that if the flood happens, then your property will not get flooded. Also, another requirement, it could be depending on the kind of development that you are proposing. We will require some measures to make sure that there is hydrostatically talking is the water will not penetrate through the basement. So that would be the main two requirements that we would ask for.
Thanks, Sandra. I did see a couple extra follow-ups while we were talking. One on pools. I love that people are already thinking ahead to summer. It's definitely the vibe with the warmer winter weather. But quick answer on that. I mean, this does apply to pools. So, it's a structure, it's development within a natural hazard area. So much like your deck or your back garden shed, give us a call and we'd walk you through that. And then I'll toss the last one over to Claire again. We do have a question just on, would they require a permit as well as a permit from the CA as well as a permit from the municipality? Claire, can you kind of differentiate the two for our listeners?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, anything that requires a building permit from the municipality, that's something that you'll deal with the municipality for, and they will contact us if it's in the regulated area, or they'll tell you to contact us if it's in the regulated area. To get a permit from us as well. So the two processes look at different things. The building permit from the municipality looks at whether or not what you're proposing to build conforms to the building code, whereas what we're looking at is the natural hazards on your property. So that's not related to the building code. So the two are both required, and you can't get your building permit until you have your permit from South Nation if it's required. So the permit from South Nation is considered applicable law under the Building Code Act, which means that the municipality won't give you your building permit if you need a permit from South Nation and you haven't received one yet.
Thanks, Claire. I like to rely on Claire because she also spent a significant amount of her career as a municipal planner, so she's got lots of expertise to share. The other thing too, guys, is generally, because our natural hazards are added to municipal zoning and they're in the official plans, our municipal partners often know that a CA permit is required before the building permit is issued. But we'd like to encourage owners to reach out to us in advance so that we can kind of help navigate them through that process and save potentially some time and money, especially if the designs might not work in the first place or need to be altered so that they can work. So I guess the message really here is that you do need both, both a permit from the CA and the municipality, but we're here to help you move through that process. There's a couple questions asking us to clarify the floodplain elevations. And I think I'll just provide a comment in terms of when you're developing in a floodplain. When Sandra alluded to earlier, we want to make sure that the lowest opening of the building is going to be 30 centimeters above that flood elevation level. And so that flood elevation level is going to be different for each property. It's going to be different depending on where exactly you're trying to build. And so as part of this process, we would give you that elevation, and we're looking to add at least 30 centimeters above. And so that means 30 centimeters or higher. And I wonder, Sandra, did you want to provide any additional clarification on that?
I think that you said it correctly. I repeat again, the best thing is to come to our office to chat with us and we look at it. I also saw, I don't know if it belongs to the same question, but somebody asked us for the French drain. It will depend. It will depend where the French drain is located, right? Because if it is located closer to the river and the flood, if it floods, the drain floods, then there will not be any difference, right? So everything is site specific, like Sean, you mentioned this.
Yeah.
So the best thing that you can do is take advantage of our pre-consultation. It's for free. You come and sit with us, and you have the engineers, the planners, everybody sitting with you and going over your project and answering all your questions.
Thanks, Sandra. Well, hey, I'll wrap with that comment and give an additional plug for those one-on-one meetings that we're advertising. We always do this as part of our consultation process. Often we'll do this, in the school or the arena when we're hosting the public meeting. But just given our project timelines, we were hoping just to give people some additional time to schedule those meetings with us. So at any point in the next couple of weeks, you can fill out that form or give us an email or a call, and we'll set up a time that works best to look through those maps and discuss how best we can help you or get you the information that you're looking for. So feel free to request those meetings, and hopefully we can connect about your potential development project. But in addition to floodplain mapping and the work that we do for our municipal partners, we also do deliver a flood forecasting and warning program. And so this does provide early and advanced notice or predictions to our municipal partners so that we can hopefully adequately respond to future flood events. And so anyone who subscribes to our newsletter, you can do that at nation.on.ca/subscribe. You also have access to some of these alerts. So something to be mindful of if you're interested in seeing when there might be flood potential or when we issue water-related advisories. And so I'm just going to close on that. Wanted to say thank you, obviously, for making time to join us tonight. This presentation will be recorded, so once it's posted on our website, you're welcome to share it with your family and friends, and hopefully we'll be in touch in the future. So merci de votre attention et bonne soirée tout le monde.